Picture the year 1720. The Caribbean sun is blinding, the water is turquoise glass, and on the horizon, a small sloop cuts through the waves, flying a black flag. Not the flag you're picturing, not a plain skull over crossed bones. This one has a skull grinning above two crossed swords, and the moment sailors saw it, they knew exactly whose ship it was. Calico Jack. The name alone was enough to make merchant crews throw down their weapons and beg for mercy. But here's the part almost nobody tells you. The man behind that flag, the pirate whose image has been copied onto lunchboxes, movie posters, and Halloween costumes for 300 years, was arguably one of the least successful pirates of the entire golden age of piracy. He never sank a warship. He never commanded a fleet. He never found a legendary treasure. He was hunted down, drunk, hiding below deck in the dark, while two women stood alone on the open deck above him and fought for his life with steel in their hands. So how does a pirate who hid from his own capture become the most recognizable pirate in human history? How does a man who lost more than he ever won end up as the face of piracy itself, the direct inspiration for Captain Jack Sparrow, for 100 novels, for the flag tattooed on 1,000,000 forearms across the world? The answer involves a mutiny at sea, a forbidden love affair that could have gotten a woman publicly whipped, a secret hidden in plain sight for years by someone standing right beside him, and a trial transcript so thin and so rushed that historians still argue today about what actually happened in the final hours before dawn. Stay with us to the very end, because once you know the real story, you will never look at that skull and swords flag the same way again. If dark true pirate history is your thing, hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because every single week we dig up a real story hiding behind a legend everyone thinks they already know. This one gets darker the deeper we go. Let's set sail. A nobody on a dead man's ship before he was Calico Jack, he was just John Rackham, a name written in a ship's ledger and almost nothing else. We don't know where he was born with any certainty. We don't know his childhood, his family, or how a man with no recorded past ended up serving on some of the most feared ships in the Caribbean. History simply opens its eyes on him, already an adult, already a criminal, already serving as quartermaster aboard a sloop called the Ranger. The Ranger belonged to Charles Vane, and if you want to understand how dangerous the world Rackham lived in truly was, you need to understand Vane first. Vane wasn't just a pirate. He was one of the cruelest captains ever to sail out of Nassau, the lawless pirate stronghold the Bahamas had become during those years. A place with no governor, no law, and no mercy, where stolen fortunes were spent in a single drunken night and grudges were settled with a blade before sunrise. Torture, executions, ships burned to the waterline with the crew still aboard. Vane did it without hesitation, and the men who sailed under him feared him almost as much as his enemies did. In August of 1718, the British Crown offered every pirate anchored in Nassau harbor a full royal pardon, total amnesty, a clean slate, and a chance to walk away from the noose forever. Vane refused it outright, and to make his contempt public, he loaded his cannons and fired directly at the governor's own ship as he sailed out of the harbor in open defiance, dragging Rackham and the rest of his crew back out into a life with no pardon, no forgiveness, and no way home. For 2 more years, Rackham served in Vane's shadow. Then, in late 1718, everything changed in a single terrifying afternoon. The Ranger crossed paths with a French warship, a man of war roughly twice their size, bristling with more cannons than the pirates could ever hope to answer. Vane did the only rational thing a captain in his position could do. He ordered a retreat. Rackham refused to accept it. According to the surviving accounts, Rackham stood in front of the crew that night and argued they should stand and fight, that retreating from a smaller prize was cowardice, that the crew deserved a captain willing to take the risk they'd all signed up for. We can't know his exact words today, but we know exactly how the crew responded. They agreed with him. That very night, in a vote every pirate crew was entitled to hold under their own unwritten code, Charles Vane, one of the most feared men in the Caribbean, was formally stripped of his command and set adrift in a small, open boat with a handful of loyal men. left to whatever fate the ocean decided for him. John Rackham, a former nobody with no recorded past, was suddenly captain of his own pirate crew. He was in his mid-30s, and the sea had just handed him a second chance most pirates never lived long enough to receive. To understand what that second chance was actually worth, you have to understand Nassau itself in those years. It wasn't a city in any real sense. It was a harbor town with no functioning government, no courts, and no law beyond whatever a captain's crew agreed to enforce among themselves. Wrecked and stolen ships lined the shallows. Rum was cheaper than clean water. Fortunes that took months of bloody risk to steal were sometimes gambled away or drunk away in a single reckless night. And then the whole cycle simply began again at dawn. Historians would later nickname it the Pirates' Republic, and for a brief, chaotic window in the early 1700s, it was the closest thing the golden age of piracy had to a capital city. This was the world Rackham now had to survive in as a captain, not just a crew member. One bad decision, one mutiny of his own, one unlucky encounter with a Navy patrol, and his second chance would end exactly as fast as it began. The flag that outlived the man. Here's where the legend actually starts to pull away from the man. Rackham took command of a small sloop and quietly began building a reputation, not through slaughter, but through a kind of calculated showmanship that none of his contemporaries bothered with. He wore calico, bright, patterned cotton cloth imported from India, expensive, impractical, and completely unnecessary for a working sailor, but unmistakable from 100 yards away on open water, while other captains dressed like the drowned rats they mostly were, soaked in salt and grime. Rackham dressed like a man who wanted to be recognized before you could even make out his face. It worked. Within months, sailors up and down the shipping lanes weren't calling him Rackham anymore. They were calling him Calico Jack, and the name spread faster than any of his actual crimes did. And then there's the flag. Most pirate flags of the era were simple and interchangeable. A plain white skull over crossed bones stitched onto black cloth, a universal warning sign meant to terrify any crew unlucky enough to see it rise up a mast. Rackham's flag replaced the bones with two crossed cutlasses. It sounds like a small change on paper. It wasn't. It transformed the symbol from a generic warning of death into something closer to a personal signature, a brand, almost 400 years before that word ever meant anything in business or marketing. Today, if you picture a pirate flag in your mind right now, there is a very real chance you are picturing Calico Jack's design, even if you had never heard his actual name before pressing play on this video. But here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. For all the reputation, for all the fear his flag was designed to inspire, Rackham's actual career as a captain barely lasted 2 years, and by most surviving accounts, his targets were small. Fishing boats, coastal traders, modest merchant sloops carrying salted fish and turtle meat, not the gold-laden galleons of legend. He was, by the cold measure of history, a minor pirate who happened to have exceptional branding wrapped around a genuinely small and unremarkable criminal record. Which raises the question we're going to circle back to by the end of this video. Was Calico Jack ever really the monster his flag promised sailors he would be? Or was the flag, from the very beginning, the entire point? The woman who changed everything in Nassau. Rackham crossed paths with a woman named Anne Bonny, and nothing about his life stayed the same afterward. Anne wasn't a passenger, a hostage, or a captain's wife hidden safely below deck the way pirate custom technically demanded of women at sea. She was already married to a sailor named James Bonny, which made what happened next both a public scandal and, under the strict colonial law of the era, a genuinely dangerous choice. Anne left her husband for Rackham. When the governor of the Bahamas found out, he threatened to have her stripped and publicly whipped for adultery, a punishment the law of the time absolutely permitted him to carry out. Rackham reportedly tried to buy her freedom the legal way, offering money for a formal divorce settlement. Anne refused to sit and wait for a governor's permission to live her own life. Instead, sometime in August of 1720, she and Rackham stole a fast 4-gun sloop called the William out of Nassau Harbor in the dead of night and simply vanished back out to open sea. choosing a hunted life together over a safe, silent life apart. Pirate crew contracts of the period almost universally banned women from serving aboard ship at all. Sailors were deeply superstitious, and a woman on deck was widely believed across the fleet to curse an entire voyage, dooming everyone aboard to storms and starvation. Rackham broke that rule without any apparent hesitation, and Anne did not sit quietly below decks, playing the role tradition had written for her. Multiple surviving accounts describe her taking up arms and fighting directly alongside the men during raids, matching them blow for blow, cursing louder than any of them when the fighting got close. And she wasn't the only woman aboard that ship carrying a secret dangerous enough to get her killed. The secret nobody suspected for years. Mary Reed's story is, if anything, even stranger than Anne's, and it starts long before she ever set foot on a pirate ship. According to the accounts collected after her trial, Mary's mother disguised her as a boy from early childhood, originally as a way to keep collecting financial support from a relative who believed he still had a living grandson. The disguise, meant to last a few years, became a way of life. Mary served in the Army and later in the Navy as a young man for years, completely undetected, fighting through European campaigns under a male identity before eventually crossing the Atlantic to the Caribbean, where the ship carrying her was captured by pirates and her fate changed course entirely. She joined that pirate crew, still presenting herself as a man, and eventually found her way aboard Rackham's small sloop, sailing alongside Anne Bonny for months, without Anne apparently realizing that her fellow crew member was also hiding behind a disguise. Sit with that for a moment. Two women, each independently disguising or openly defying the role their world had assigned them, ended up serving side by side on the very same small pirate ship, in an environment where discovery could mean assault, betrayal, or a noose. And somehow, for a long stretch of time, neither the rest of the crew nor even each other knew the full truth of who they really were. When the truth did finally surface between them, most accounts agree the two women became close, fiercely loyal allies inside a world built entirely by and for men who would have happily used either secret against them. And when the ship's final, desperate battle came, it would be these two women, not Rackham, and not a single one of his male crew, who stood their ground when everyone else around them ran and hid. The night the hunters came by October of 1720, the governor of Jamaica had had enough. A formal proclamation went out branding Rackham and his crew pirates and enemies of the crown, and a former privateer named Jonathan Barnet was commissioned to hunt them down by any means necessary. Rackham's crew had just pulled off one of their better hauls, seizing a small Spanish fishing vessel, and that night, anchored near the western tip of Jamaica under a clear sky, they did what pirate crews had done for 100 years after a good haul. They celebrated. Rum flowed freely from cup to cup. Several accounts describe the crew drinking alongside local turtle fishermen late into the night, laughing, boasting, completely unaware that Barnet's sloop was already closing in through the darkness with its lanterns doused. When Barnet's ship struck, it wasn't a fair fight. It was a slaughter of the unprepared. Rackham and the vast majority of his male crew were, according to the surviving trial testimony, too drunk to even properly lift a weapon in their own defense. Most of them fled below deck and hid in the hold rather than face the boarding party climbing over the rail, leaving the open deck almost entirely undefended in the dark. Almost, Anne Bonny and Mary Reed did not run. While the men who had sailed beside them for months cowered below in the dark, the two women stood alone on the open deck and fought Barnet's entire boarding party directly, cutlasses drawn, according to sworn testimony given later at the trial itself. It didn't change the final outcome. The ship was overwhelmed within minutes, and every soul aboard was dragged into custody before sunrise. But it left behind one of the most quietly devastating details in the entire legend, that the two people fighting hardest to defend Calico Jack's ship and Calico Jack's life were the two people the pirate world had least expected to fight at all. The trial, and the last words that outlived him, Rackham and his crew, were dragged in chains to Spanish Town, Jamaica, for a trial that lasted only a matter of days. The surviving court record still exists today, and it is barely 20 pages long. By modern standards, it would never hold up in any real courtroom. Witnesses were limited, the proceedings were rushed, and by most accounts, the verdict was essentially decided before a single piece of testimony was even heard. John Rackham was found guilty on multiple separate counts of piracy and sentenced to hang by the neck until dead. Before his execution, Anne Bonny was reportedly permitted one final visit to his cell. What she said to him that night has been repeated for 3 centuries, and whether the exact wording survived perfectly intact or was polished and sharpened by later storytellers hungry for a dramatic ending, the sentiment behind it has never once been forgotten. She told him, in essence, that if he had fought like a man, he would not now be about to die like a dog. John Rackham was hanged in Port Royal on November 18, 1720. His body wasn't simply buried and left to be forgotten by the tide. It was gibbeted, locked inside an iron cage and hung on public display at the entrance to the harbor on a small spit of land that still carries his name today, Rackham's Cay, a permanent, rotting warning to every sailor entering the port for years afterward. Anne Bonny and Mary Read were also convicted and sentenced to hang alongside him. Both women claimed to be pregnant, invoking an old legal protection that spared expectant mothers from execution while carrying a child, and their sentences were formally delayed. Mary Read died in prison, likely of fever, before her case was ever resolved any further. What happened to Anne Bonny afterward is one of the great open mysteries left behind in pirate history. No confirmed execution record has ever been found. No confirmed release record exists either. She simply disappears from the historical record entirely, mid-sentence, as if the ocean itself swallowed the paperwork, and 300 years of writers, historians, and treasure hunters have never definitively uncovered what became of her. The mystery that won't die, that vanishing act, has haunted historians for centuries, and it's worth sitting in the discomfort of it for a moment, because real history rarely offers the clean ending fiction demands. Some later writers claimed Anne Bonny's wealthy father paid a quiet ransom to spare her life and smuggle her back to the American colonies, where she supposedly married again, raised a family, and lived into old age under a completely different name. Others insist she died quietly in that same Jamaican prison, her death simply never properly logged in a colonial system that rarely bothered to carefully record what happened to condemned women. There is no surviving document that definitively settles it either way, only silence where an ending should be. And that silence is exactly the kind of gap legends are built inside. A dangerous woman who fought like a soldier, loved an outlaw, and then simply disappeared from every record without explanation is precisely the kind of loose thread a good story can't resist pulling on for 300 years. Every generation since has quietly rewritten her ending to fit whatever they needed her to be: a tragic victim, a triumphant survivor, a ghost still walking some Caribbean shoreline. We may never actually know which version, if any, is true. The flag that conquered the world here's the strangest twist in the entire story, and it might be the most important one. Calico Jack lost. He lost his freedom, he lost his ship, and he lost his life on a Jamaican gallows before he ever turned 40. By any practical measure, his career was a failure. And yet, of every single pirate flag flown during the entire golden age of piracy, his is the one that won. Walk into any costume shop in October and you'll find that skull and cross swords on cheap plastic eye patches and foam cutlasses. Look at the corner of 100 different sports jerseys, energy drink cans, and heavy metal album covers. And there it is again, quietly borrowed, rarely credited. When Hollywood needed to design the definitive symbol of piracy for the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, decades of visual culture had already done the work for them, because Calico Jack's design had spent nearly 300 years slowly becoming shorthand for the word pirate itself. Think about how strange that actually is. Blackbeard burned lit fuses into his beard during battle to look like he'd crawled straight out of hell. Charles Vane tortured captives without a flicker of hesitation. Bartholomew Roberts, arguably the most successful pirate captain who ever lived, captured over 400 ships in a career that dwarfs Rackham's by every measure that matters. None of them own the modern image of piracy the way Calico Jack does. A minor captain who commanded barely 20 men for less than 2 years somehow outmarketed every one of them, using nothing but a bolt of imported cotton cloth and a small, clever redesign of a symbol that already existed. That's not an accident of history. That's the power of image outliving substance, playing out in real time across 3 centuries. And it should make you a little uneasy about how easily legends get built in the first place. Was any of it real? So let's finally ask the question this entire video has been building toward. Was Calico Jack really the fearsome pirate captain his flag suggests? Or is the legend doing something almost the exact opposite of what we all assume? Nearly everything popular culture believes about Rackham traces back to a single 18th century book, a sensationalized collection of pirate biographies published just a few short years after his death, written for a paying readership that wanted scandal, romance, and horror far more than it wanted careful accuracy. Historians have spent decades trying to separate what's independently verifiable, mostly drawn from the surviving trial record and a handful of government proclamations, from what was invented or wildly exaggerated for entertainment. The trial documents themselves don't confirm many of the more dramatic details later attached to his legend. They confirm a short piracy career, a handful of captured fishing and trading vessels, a crew of barely 20 souls at the moment of his capture, and a swift, almost anticlimactic ending in a Jamaican courtroom. By the cold measure of the men he actually sailed against and beneath, men like Blackbeard or Charles Vane himself, Rackham was, by most honest accounts, a minor figure. He didn't terrorize entire trade routes for years. He didn't sink Navy warships. He commanded, for a matter of months, a single small sloop and a crew of fewer than 20 people. And yet here we are, 3 centuries later, making a video about him. Because Calico Jack never needed to be the most dangerous pirate who ever lived. He only needed to be the most memorable one. The calico clothing that made him visible from 100 yards away. The custom flag that turned a generic warning into a personal brand. The 2 women who fought while every man around them hid in the dark. The final line whispered in a prison cell the night before he died. Every single piece of his story is built for retelling, which may be exactly why it was retold, embellished, and eventually turned into the blueprint for Captain Jack Sparrow himself, and for the modern image of a pirate that Hollywood still leans on heavily today. Maybe that's the real horror quietly hiding underneath this story. Not that some unstoppable monster once terrorized the seas without mercy, but that history rewarded style over substance so completely that a minor pirate, one who hid below deck during his own final battle, became through sheer branding alone more famous than captains who actually earned their fearsome reputations in blood. So the next time you see that skull and crossed swords stitched onto a flag, printed on a lunchbox, or blown up 30 feet tall on a movie poster, remember what's actually standing behind it. Not an unstoppable monster of the open sea, but a quartermaster who staged a mutiny to survive. A man who dressed for attention because attention was the only currency he ever truly mastered. And 2 women who, when it mattered most, in the one moment that actually counted, showed more courage than the legend built around them has ever given them credit for. What do you think really happened aboard that ship the night Barnet's crew came over the rail in the dark? Was Rackham simply a coward, or was he outnumbered and out of time before he ever had a real chance to fight back? Drop your theory in the comments below. And if you want more true, dark stories hiding quietly behind history's most famous legends, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next voyage. We'll see you on the next one.